Okay, there we go. How are we doing, people? 8 o'clock. Welcome to the Sports Therapy Association podcast. How are you? Good evening to you if you're joining us from somewhere where it's evening. But we are getting, when I look at the downloads for the podcast, people who are listening to the recording, it's great. Thank you very much. If you're joining us from Canada, from the United States, from New Zealand, Australia, India, wicked. It's really nice to think that we are breaking the boundaries which our government does so hard to try and set up, but it's really good, really nice without getting too political. So I hope you're well, and looking forward to this session because I am rubbing my trousers in case you can't see what I'm doing on the screen. It's episode 44, and for the first time in podcast history, I've checked, Joe Rogan's never done it, Bisping's never done it. Well, great documentary, the Bisping one. I recommend you watch that if you like a bit of MMA. But anyway, none of them. Adam Buxton hasn't done it. A guest has returned the week afterwards, 2 guests in this sense. And yeah, we're really excited that they did have time in their busy schedules. Because last week with the Shockwave Therapy Part 1, there were so many questions and it was great. And it was a little bit of testing the water. We had some people in the room, including me, who wanted to clear up a lot of the stuff we see on social media in particular about there's no evidence for it. What's the difference between it and ultrasound? Are we just banging a new drum? What about the placebo or context effect and all that sort of stuff? So we did quite a lot of that last week. If you haven't heard it, then I would recommend that you either go to YouTube to our channel to watch it. Personally, I'm quite visual. I like watching. I like seeing the speakers, and I like seeing the reactions, the laughter and the tears sometimes. So yeah, it is all on YouTube. But if you prefer the audio whilst you're running or something, then you can go and listen to the audio on any good podcast app. Okay, so that'll be 43. And it's probably worth doing that because it will give you a little bit of info which we won't necessarily cover again this evening. If you do enjoy it, by the way, I'm just going to say this quickly. Do please leave a rating, leave a review. It takes 20 seconds if you're on an iPhone because it's just part of your app. If you're on Android, it's a bit more of a pain because you have to go into iTunes, as far as I know. But amazing if you can do it. That's the way you show your support. We don't ask for money or anything. It's just you helping us get this word out to more people. So if you can do that, that'd be great. Also, just to remind you that during the lockdown, which is still kind of happening, we're hoping things maybe shift, but for the moment STA is doing a student membership for £1 for 2 months. So it's brought it completely down. If you're a little bit brassic and you still want some membership and you still want access to the great stuff we're putting on the new website and everything, £1 a month for a couple of months, and then we'll see where we are then. And you've also got, if you're a fully qualified therapist, you've got £10 a month for a couple of months to keep you in the know, if you like to kind of be able to get through to our members only information. And then even after if we do go back, or when, sorry, let's be positive, when we do go back to normal membership prices, then you're still, I push you to find something cheaper and better quality. It's very rare you get that mixture. Really excited actually to announce that in the not too distant future, I can't remember the date of it now, but we're going to have Mr. Balins himself of Balins Insurance. Isn't that amazing? On here on the show to talk about all things insurance for soft tissue therapists, the man himself. I'm so excited about that. It's going to be great. What a great important topic. It's going to be amazing. So make sure you follow us on social media across the board and keep an eye out for guests coming up. We've got a fantastic guests coming up, a few more little surprises as well. So do keep your eyes open and do share our posts and everything. So for the first time ever in the history of this podcast, I'd like to say thank you to our guests last week, Ove Indergaard and Mike Grice. Fantastic show. Really recommend you watch it. And also I'd like to say thank you to this week's guests, Ove Indergaard and Mike Grice. I hope you're looking forward to it. In case you're not sure, these two, then Ove Indergaard is Clinical Director of Indergaard Physiotherapy. You can find him across Twitter and Facebook. Mike Grice, a lot of you in the STA will already know of. He's been on the show before. Owner, education director of Movement Therapy Education, and a lot more fish to fry as well. So Mike is here as well. If you're joining us live either on YouTube or Facebook, then obviously you are able to leave questions and comments. I can bring these up on the screen. So if it does get a bit unclear what we're talking about, if you listen to the podcast, it's because this is a live recording. We do it all live. It's necessary. because we like the reactions. We don't like this cut, edit, say that again, put in some music, take it out. No. This is all raw as it happens. No pre-planned questions or answers, as you can probably tell by my warbling on. So if you do want to say hello, get your brand out there, then join us live. As Emma Victoria Wardle here is. Hey, Emma, thanks for joining us. And Emma Morris and Harry Chambers and Becky Carroll and Catherine Reimer and another 42 people already in the house. So without further ado, I think that sets the scene. We're going to have part 2 of Shockwave Therapy with Uwe Indergaard. Can't remember how I said it first. Uwe or something. Uwe Indergaard and Mike Grice. Gentlemen, good evening.
Back again. How you doing, mate?
You should have just kept in the internet land somewhere and just come over. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. So kind. Obviously, we didn't know whether you'd be able to, but I really appreciate it because the feedback from last week has been incredible. Is that nice to hear? Or all positive? As in, I want more information. Is that a good thing?
I think so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I had loads of messages afterwards. Loads.
Did James Morgan contact you? He contacted me. Did he contact you?
Yeah, I think so.
Did he contact you as well?
He's contacted
He called Gary up as well. James here tonight? He called my wife and he's never even met my wife before. Bizarre. James, hope you're here tonight as well. Right, so yes, people, there was some great feedback. Now, I don't know what feedback you've had, obviously, but to give you a little summary, and I'm sure people in here, I know people in here contacted me, but there was a right mixture of things. There's a few people who contact. Oh, James is here. Hey, James. How you doing? How you don't mind me calling you out like that? James has already said, actually, it's going to be the James Morgan show tonight. James just says, any therapists in Exeter? I could do one in my clinic. So now he's got it and he's recruiting. So that's good, James. Good to see you, mate. No, I got some people who aren't here tonight. I got a couple of emails saying, geez, you let them off easy, didn't you, Matt? Like as if I was supposed to produce these. I think I did my fair share on being a little bit cynical. And I started off with what's the difference between that and ultrasound kind of thing. And I think you answered them really well. I think that's one of the great things that you two did do last week. You didn't say this is the answer to everything and everybody should have it. You did exactly the opposite. So I did reply to those people who did send me a little bit of, God, they got off way too easy with suitable replies. But there'll still be some tricky questions, I hope, tonight for myself and people in there who aren't quite convinced. One of them was, yeah, okay, right. So there's a bit of evidence for it. Fair enough. We know how evidence is. But geez, it's expensive. Seriously? So that's going to be one of the things we can hopefully talk about tonight. If anyone in the audience has got that question as well, then obviously bring that up. What else did I hear? Oh, that was interesting. I heard some people were actually generally worried about the training and about hurting others. That was a couple that I didn't expect, as in even with training, because we don't know that much about it and it's relatively new, can be cause danger to people and stuff like that. So we got lots to talk about tonight. James Morgan has already said, shut up. There you go. So where do we start, guys? I don't know. Where would you like to start? Do you want to ask a question, or is there anything you'd like to say about the feedback you got?
I think there's some interesting questions that you got there, and some important topics that needs to be addressed. You
can start wherever you like then. How about the expense? That was a big one. How much is it gonna? That seems to be a big kind of door closer for a lot of people. It's just gonna be way too expensive, and maybe they haven't even looked. I mean, I looked online here to give you an idea. I googled it because I suppose that's what everyone's going to do. And I just looked at kind of the first 4 or 5 or something, and the price is kind of ranged. I'm not sure how well people are going to see this if I put it on full screen. You can't see this on the podcast, but I'm just putting like a Google result where I put in ESWT, Shockwave Therapy, and the prices ranged from kind of $3,000 to 800, 1,400. There was one down the bottom there which was 14 grand. I want to know what that one does. But what is the situation with prices, and why is there such a difference?
I think first of all, the technology in itself is traditionally quite expensive to acquire. So before we went on the last podcast, I actually inquired with Storts of how much the machines actually used to cost about 15 years ago when they started to become quite popular. And the price back then for a radial shockwave was £20,000 plus that, and a focus machine was 40,000. So these are the times when shockwave was starting to become popular, get nice approval and all these things, and consultants were charging £300 per session for Shockwave. These days, the price have come down massively by the top manufacturers out there, and you can get a basic radial machine for around about £8,000 from Storz. I think the Chattanooga ones start about 10,000. I'm not entirely sure about EMS, but then you also do have eBay and China, and there are a few Chinese manufacturers out there. I get followed on Instagram by quite a few, some Turkish ones as well. And you know, there's a couple of things to think about. One, you don't know about the durability of the machines. They haven't really been tested. They're not used in the research. The second thing of all would be, are they actually safety tested in this country? Have they got the CE marking, which is really, really important, because that means that you are actually allowed to use it on humans. And then the third thing is does it actually say what it's meant to do? So a client of mine actually has a clinic, and he bought a Shockwave machine from China. It cost him £1,000, and it took him, I think the machine did 1 hertz, so basically 1 pulse per second. So the average radial will do somewhere between, well, I guess 6, but around, you usually use them about 10 hertz to the muscle treatments that we do, maybe 15 to 17 hertz. And so 1 hertz, so to get the dosage that you need for an effective treatment, which is usually around about 2,000 pulses, it would take an awful long time to get there. And so he used to give 600 pulses, because that took him 10 minutes, and that was it for his treatment. And so you can't then compare the treatment that you're getting and the effects that you should be getting with the kind of the more studied approaches of the established manufacturers.
That's really interesting.
We had a bit of a chat as well before we went live, and so one of my guys in my team, he went on one of the courses, went to put Shockwave onto his insurance, and Balin's were then starting asking a lot of questions about our setup, and that this was one of the kind of reasons why we're looking into the training in a bit more detail, because he's a sports therapist. So and the questions came from Balin's about the CE marking, making sure the machine had CE marking, but also the maintenance and upkeep of the machine. So did you have a service contract in place, or do you have records of your maintenance that you do? So there's quite a lot to think about when you get one of these machines. It's not just buying it and then that's it. There's an ongoing cost, and I know that it's the price per session is often balked at, but there's a lot of ongoing costs with using these machines. We have to make sure that we've maintained them so that they're safe to use. So yeah, it's interesting that the insurers now are starting to ask those questions.
Yeah, we have the same with physio as well. So when we went to register with Bupa for doing shockwave therapy, we had to specify the manufacturer, and also, like you said, that you have a maintenance contract in place, because you do need that ongoing maintenance. You have moving parts, they're going to break down, and you got to make sure that the machine actually puts out the energy that it's supposed to be putting out.
So it's interesting. I just want to point out to people listening and in the room tonight, you guys aren't involved in the sale of any particular machine at all. You're not involved in sales at all, are you?
No. None whatsoever.
I mean, and what's your reason for that? I mean, if people want security and they trust you, why not just say, well, look, this is the one you need?
Sorry, mate, but we had a bit of a chat about that. I think it was just after last week's session, and the last thing I wanted to do was to blur the lines between the manufacturer or the provider in this country that I used and the training that I deliver. I wanted to keep it completely separate so that there was no chance that my ethics could ever be brought into question. I'm not trying to push the sale of the machine onto anybody. I don't get any commission for any sale of any machine, and I didn't want any either. It's not something that I wanted to get involved in.
And similarly, I mean, I actually teach for one of the manufacturers, so you could say that I'm a little bit biased on that account. However, we don't get any commissions on sales. We're hired in to do the educational side of things, and that's as far as our relationship goes. Now, because I'm comfortable using their equipment, which is also why I teach for them, I'm happy to advise people on their type of equipment and my experience with that. I don't hold back if there's some of their equipment that isn't worth investing in.
Yeah.
I also tell people that I don't want people to waste their money. So if somebody comes to me and says, well, what do I need as a basic setup, or what would it actually need? We talk about that on the training course as well. The different options that you have, but it comes down to credibility at the end of the day. I think if we were seen to be taking money from a sale of a machine or whatever, then I think our credibility would be pretty low. And that's something that we need to avoid. We want to come across as healthcare practitioners, providing other healthcare practitioners with some decent advice.
Makes sense. I think that's where a lot of distrust of equipment comes, because you go to like a rather large, I don't know, therapy exposition of some form, and you do see them. It's almost like secondhand car salesman, isn't it? There's the suit and the chat and the talk and people just don't trust it. So no, it makes great sense that you're not. And as you said, I mean, you beat me to it, but on the course, I imagine a lot of people are asking, okay, so what equipment should I buy, guys? What are some of the factors that people should take into consideration when they are investing in a machine, depending on what they choose? What are some of the things they need to consider?
For me, because the cost is so high, there's the effectiveness of the equipment. First of all, as in, will they actually do what I want it to do? When you look at the research studies, there's 2 or 3 manufacturers that most of the research has been done by, if you like, or rather that the equipment has been used in those studies. And EMS and Storz are probably the 2 biggest ones. Chattanooga as well. They kind of buy most of the equipment from Storz and repackage it as their Chattanooga DJO devices. So they have a very similar technology, just a different look of it. And then there are a few studies out there on the others, but that was an important factor for me when I first invested. I needed to know that I could get the results that was needed. The second thing is durability. You want that equipment to last a long time when you first make that first purchase. Again, it's about your investment and making sure that your investment will actually be there in 6 months' time or a year. And then the second part of that is, do you have a company that will actually help to support you after you bought it, so that you can maintain that machine in a good operational way, so that you have access to repairs, you have access to servicing, you have access to emergency repairs. Your machine breaks one day, the next day you've got 5 clients booked in for Shockwave. What do? Do you cancel them all and wait 2 weeks until the service engineer comes to visit you? Or can you pick up a phone to somebody and actually get some help, and they can send somebody out that day? Or you can get a replacement part, sent in the mail or whatever. So there's lots of factors like that to think about. What do you think, Mike?
Yep. For me, it was it's who do you normally see? What kind of patients do you normally see? And for me, I was seeing a lot of tendinopathies. So I've got a lot of links with triathlete clubs, with running clubs, and coming in again and again and again. And then I did my research around. I looked at things like I looked at laser. I looked at and then I looked at Shockwave. Those are the main 2 really, and the Shockwave evidence was superior for me for tendinopathy presentation. So that's why I chose it for my clinic. It suited my client base. So I it's always a bit of a risk when you do invest that much money, but I had the client base there that I could use it on. So
that's really interesting. I just want to check. So I just seen a comment there. Rob Puds has said, "Is there an echo?" I can't hear an echo, Rob. I'm just checking if someone else in the listening live can tell me if there's an echo or not. Because it's too good to miss. I don't want to have to spend hours on Audacity here. Is everybody else okay when you're hearing? I'll wait for someone to put something in the comments. That's a really good point. I like that, Mike. So it depends on. So you've already mentioned if you see a lot of your clientele with tendinopathies of some form, then that could be a sign that that's good. So who do you think it wouldn't be, apart from, I've got a couple of questions here. What order should I put them out with? First of all, there are payment plans, aren't there? You can pay it bit by bit because it is quite a lot of money. So is that something you've got to watch out for, or are the payment plans kind of quite reasonable and something to think about?
That's a difficult one because I have no idea.
Right.
I can only tell you my experience with that. I put down a little bit of a deposit on my first machine, and then I took out a loan with Funding Circle to pay for the rest of the machine, and paid it back that way. I found, some finance. There are medical finance companies out there who will help you out with this, and they'll give you a quote on buying it. I mean, I think my loan was 170, 180 pounds a month over 3 years or something like that, which I made my calculations and thought, well, I can see X amount of people per week, and if I saw 2 or 3 patients per week over a month, that would pay for the machine. And initially that was my goal. It was literally just to cover the cost of the machine and to have another offering in the clinic. And so, when you then break it down like that, it doesn't seem such a big investment. As long as you've got the clients there, Mike's absolutely right. If your clinic is full of tendinopathy clients and you have lots of runners and things like that coming in, then you're going to get your use out of it, because there are clients there who need your help.
Yeah.
Can you remind me of what the success rate was? I think we were talking about plantar fasciopathy, and that's kind of pretty good is that the king of kind of the research at the moment? That's the one that's given the best results, or?
So yeah, I mean, the success rate, in the various studies is somewhere between 35 and 85%, depending on who you look at. But in terms of evidence-based, plantar fasciitis is probably one of the most evidence-based ones. There's one study there by Wang from 2019, and that looks at 356 studies. So there's 356 placebo-controlled trials that have been put together in a systematic reviews, and that was the one I mentioned last time about where they looked at the optimal treatment intensity for plantar fasciitis, and so they had nearly 870 individual patients included in those trials, and compared to placebo from 3, 6, and 12 months, Shockwave outperformed the placebo significantly. So in terms of evidence base, that's pretty high. If you can name me another treatment for plantar fasciitis who has 356 placebo-controlled trials, then that would be really great to see. There's another study as well, which is it's one of these network meta-analysis where they looked at 8 different treatments as well for plantar fasciitis. And when you're looking at non-steroidal anti-inflammatories to PRP, steroid injections, dry needling, autologous, whole blood injections, and out of all of those treatments, the Shockwave again at both at all intervals, I guess from 6 months and onwards, was significantly better than any of those treatments.
I think what we'll do, I mean, obviously, I've got some studies here which you've sent me, which I've enjoyed reading and looking into, but I think it's not kind of like a cherry picking thing, but I think it'd be useful for people if I bring up the ones that's about 6 or 7, if you flick through them, and we'll just say what they're called for people listening to podcasts, and you can tell us briefly what those studies, how those studies have helped you kind of make your decisions. We'll bring them up in a sec. Sarah, no, where were we? Yes, Sarah says, sorry if I missed it. How much is a machine in general? What kind of price bracket did we put for machines, people?
I think it's around about the 12k mark for a radial device. It's somewhere between there, sort of 8 to 12, depending on the manufacturer you go for. And then if you're after a focus device, then it's up towards the sort of 18, 20, I think, is around that kind of area.
Yeah, between 18 and 25 grand, depending on the manufacturer.
Okay, so no more expensive than a small bed sitting Lancing or something.
Yeah. Just on what Uwe said about the funding for it. So through my clinic, I use PayPal for everything. This isn't. I have no commission with PayPal either. But what they do a capital repayment scheme where if all of your income comes through PayPal, they will lend you capital investment money. So when I very first opened my clinic, I was able to borrow like £2,000, I think it was, and I was able to buy a squat rack. with some weights, and then every payment then I put through PayPal, they took 30% of my payments going through. So I didn't actually have a fixed monthly fee. It was based on what I was bringing in. So it was a lot more flexible than the loans that you usually get. And then I just got another one, and then I got another one, and then I had enough sort of income then from building everything in the clinic to then get a Shockwave device, and that's how I did it. Just paid that money off, then 30% off every single person coming in. So it's it made it a lot more manageable.
Brilliant. That's great. The power of STA networking ideas. So that's really useful to know. James Morgan, I think we said that. Let's just check. We mentioned about the Chattanooga, didn't we, as a manufacturer? What did you say? Who was it that they buy from?
They usually buy the parts, all the moving parts and hand pieces and stuff from stores, and then they reassemble. They have different software. They have a different look of the machine and things like that. But like the hand piece and everything is more or less a store's device.
Cool. Hope that helps, James. All right, let's do that if that's all right with you. I'm going to bring these up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put them on full screen so people can actually see them on their computer or phone or something, and either of you can kind of chime in and just say, well, why you sent this to me, how you think it helps, comment on the study. A couple of you already mentioned already, but let's bring them up. Let's put them on full screen so people can actually see more or less. So this was the effective focused extracorporeal shockwave therapy on myofascial pain syndrome of trapezius. Was that was my one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the one that you sent through to me.
That was the one which actually I was sent, which people will probably see because it does its rounds on social media. So it's not bad bringing this up. In fact, this is really good because it shows I'm not cherry picking. This is one which you'll probably see. It's being pasted by a few skeptical people. Its conclusions are there is very low level evidence that focused ESWT is effective in short-term relief of neck pain in MPS or myofascial pain syndrome of trapezius.
I haven't read the paper, and my comment to you, as I mentioned to you last week when we chatted about it, is that myofascial pain syndrome is probably not the core treatment that you will be using your shockwave device for.
It's a very good reply.
In terms of remember the ISMST, the International Society for Medical Shockwave Therapy, they classify things in terms of basic indications to more advanced indications, and the myofascial pain syndrome comes in as a more advanced indication, which one means that there's a little bit inconclusive evidence for it as well. It's not as strong as it is for the ones that are considered the basic indications. And most of the tendinopathies that we certainly talk about in our courses, which is the kind of the top 6 conditions, which is plantar fasciitis, Achilles, patellar tendinopathy, gluteal tendon problems or pain syndrome, tennis elbow, and calcific tendinopathy of the shoulder. Those are the kind of the most evidence-based conditions within MSK that you would start using your shockwave machine for. So myofascial pain syndrome is not really something that you treat in isolation. I think I gave you a link to another paper that showed that is equally effective to other treatments like dry needling and such for it. And that's again, it's evidence for and against. And if you want to cherry pick, then we can all cherry pick, I guess, and find something that refutes something else. But like I said, it's not really a core condition that you would necessarily treat. It might be something that you try to treat. I mean, we have some great results with radial shockwave for people's back pain after disc problems. Once they've had their disc kind of symptoms have recovered, but they haven't really started to engage their muscles properly down there, and they're still in that protective muscle spasm, we can then reduce the muscle tone in there and actually start to educate proper movement there again. So then sometimes it helps, but it's not something that if somebody comes in with a bit of neck pain and you've got a tight muscle up there, that I would reach for my shockwave device and use it on.
Brilliant. So bear that in mind, people, when you're looking at social media, shared papers and things to and fro from kind of normally polarized arguments. Just check it's not going to solve everything. It's not. No one argues that it's going to work wherever you put it on the body. So just check what they're using it for. This is one you sent me, which answers a couple of emails I got about safety. If you can't see it if you listen to the podcast, obviously, but it's the safety of shockwave therapy. Study 2,700 heels and a systematic review. Talk us through this one then, if you would, one of you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a slide from my training course, I guess. So that this is just this one of two studies. If you were to search for safety of and complications of shockwave therapy, this is one of the main ones that comes up, and there aren't many that look at studies, but that look at the safety aspects of it, because it's kind of widely regarded to be safe, because most of the studies that you have will report adverse events, and very few of them actually report it. So, but this one did. And so again, we're looking at plantar fasciitis, and with the high amount of heels that's included in this. And out of those, I mean, there was two complications like precordial pain, which, a heart attack, and skin infection. It's not something that you would normally associate with shockwave. And again, the study actually looks at this and said, the heart attack or the heart pain was not actually because of the shockwave. It was due to something else, but it was still reported. And then we mentioned this study actually last time, where there was about 250 people who reported pain during treatment, which isn't unusual. It's not a sensation-free treatment, and so some discomfort is quite normal. And the transient red skin after the treatment is, for radial therapy or radial shockwave therapy, you have a ballistic bullet that hits a piece of metal that then stimulates your skin. So to expect the skin to be a bit red is pretty normal. Mm-hmm. But then what you're interested in is, does it cause any complications long term? Does it cause any things like ruptures and things like that? And it doesn't. And so, it is a very, very safe treatment.
Fantastic. Okay, so we'll look over here. We're looking at short and intermediate term results of extracorporeal shockwave therapy for non-insertional Achilles tendinopathy. What was it about this session, this paper?
So this is a relatively new paper from 2021, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to include it. We talked about how new evidence is a little bit more real world than the old type, which tend to focus on shockwave in isolation. So this study obviously looked at two groups. So it's a double-blind RCT level 1 study, and both groups had already failed conservative management. So that's often a real-world scenario that we see. And so the control group then continued doing specific eccentric training and stretching of the Achilles, and the other group did then shockwave in addition to the same treatment protocol. And at 1 month, shockwave outperformed the control group, and still better at 16 months. And this reverberates other evidence out there, which has been there for a little while now, which you can see there's a great review that obviously gets used a lot, which is done by Kyriakis, which is from the BDSM, 2015, I think it was, which then concluded exactly the same, that shockwave combined with exercise actually outperforms exercise alone. And this is just another study, but again, it's the fact that it's such a high level study. It's the fact that they had already failed the conservative management, and then the sign. So this is after 4 weekly sessions of relatively high bar pressure, but it's the mid portion of the Achilles, so that's not unusual, and 2,000 pulses on the main area.
Fantastic. And these will form part of, like you say, the education and the courses you do, just to keep people informed.
Exactly. So I think the important bit here is I think we spoke off camera about why would you need to come on a training course, and the machines are safe. So in theory, you could aim it just about anywhere and get away with it. The training comes where you want to be more effective, where you want to be able to clinically justify where you're putting it and how much you're putting it on there, and knowing the nuances between treating it in one way or the other. Mm-hmm. So it's understanding the equipment better, getting the most out of the big investment that you've made. And then, we go through safety aspects, we go through all the evidence that's there as well to get you started. And then, there are more advanced courses you can do as well, which then goes deeper into certain areas and also shows you more of the advanced stuff that you can do and get away with your machine.
Brilliant. Mike, I want to give a shout out to you actually, because I saw something just recently.
Yeah.
You actually got a course for people, particularly sports therapists who aren't that savvy on understanding research. I saw that somewhere. Tell us a little bit about that, because that kind of fits in quite nicely now for people who automatically see papers and go, oh.
So there's there's a bit of a gap with the sort of level 3, level 4, even into the level 5 courses for soft tissue, where there's no real education on how to search the literature, how to appraise the literature, even kind of where to start really, but with anything, even getting a database, which is like a kind of medical Google, and then working out, well, how the heck do I find the papers that I need to find? How do I do keywords to narrow searches down? Because if you type in hamstring rehab into BJSM, you'll come up with about 100,000 papers. So how do you narrow those down into the ones that are going to be useful for you? But then also, because they know then how to do that, they will then be able to appraise papers like this in a much better way, because they'll understand the process that these guys will have had to go through, and especially when you read a literature review. So if you read a review of many different papers, then why did they choose those papers? Why did they include some and then exclude others? And would you have made that decision? So it's not about being right or wrong. It's about just being critical about what you're reading. And yeah, so it's based on the stuff that I used to teach when I was teaching at university on the sports therapy degree. So it's that kind of first year undergraduate level research methods. So yeah, it's hopefully I've put it in a nice package so that people can get to the end of it. Well, by the end of it, you'll be able to do a CASP review. So using the critical appraisal tool of a systematic review. So that's what you'll be able to do at the end. So
brilliant. Sounds good. We'll make sure links get put out for that. But I think there's already some posts in the Sports Therapy Association website somewhere. I'm sure I've seen it. I'm sure I saw it there. We had a question here from Sarah. You could read the paper, Sarah, but why bother? I'm sure that one of these gentlemen has the answer for that. 4 weekly sessions for how many weeks?
Yeah, let me just clarify that. That's 4 sessions done weekly, not 4 in 1 week.
It does sound like a lot. Yeah, 4 sessions done weekly. Yeah, so 1 session a week for 4 weeks.
Can I just add, Matt, as well on that? So Uwe's mentioned it a few times as well, and I think this is a real big consideration if you're going to invest in a machine. I did a tendon course a little while ago with Pete Maliaris, and we were at the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital in Birmingham, and he was like, right, let's get into the gym and let's load some tendons. And they had TheraBand, and that was it. So if you are going to use these machines and you're going to use it in a way that's that follows the evidence, then you need to have the right kind of setup, so you have access to properly rehab these people as well. So that's got to be a consideration if you're buying this kit.
Just to make sure, Pete was, I imagine, horrified at that. It wasn't like he only asked for TheraBands. He was just as surprised as you were, I guess. Yeah, just checking that you were. It sounded like you were criticizing one of his courses. Like,
no, his course was amazing, but you had to. We were sitting on each other's legs to do soleus. Because there was nothing to load us. Yeah, so it's
yeah. Cool. Okay. Keep the questions coming, people. I think actually Sarah as well has got a question just specifically about a particular bit of equipment. I'll read it out so podcast people can hear. I have access to a Zimmer N-Pulse Pro radial 1 to 22 hertz. I'd appreciate an opinion before I offer it out. I'd rather offer a valuable treatment as opposed to poor quality with poor equipment. Familiar with that, or?
I'm a little bit familiar with it. I've never used one. I mean, Zimmer is a reputable brand. The way that machine works is different to the other radials on the market, as it's electromagnetic, I think. So there's no compressor involved there, so there's no air pressure. But that's as much as I know about the machine. I think it's slightly cheaper as well. I think it might be like 5,000-6,000 to buy if somebody was looking at one of them. But it's like I said, an electromagnetic, so it's the machine is no bigger than one of the old ultrasound machines, which then creates the pulse. But in terms of effectiveness, I don't know it. In terms of the research studies on it, I don't think I've seen more than maybe one session on it, and I didn't pay much attention to it because it generates the force in a different way to the equipment that I tend to use. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one to comment on, really.
But I guess if it's $4,000 cheaper, then in theory it's missing something. It's tricky to slice $4,000 off, isn't there, without taking out a fairly essential component. I would have thought
in the expense of the compressor,
yeah.
You know, and producing that level of equipment. So like I said, I cannot comment on the effectiveness of it because I've never really used one.
So what you can do is do Mike's research course and then do an appraisal on the evidence that's out there for that particular machine. Then come back, we'll have you on in say 3 weeks or something, and you can talk to us about it. It'd be great.
Perfect.
Talk to us about the course.
2,000-word systematic review.
That's what we need, Sarah. If you're up for it, just email me, Matt. Yeah, that'd be fine. Okay, any more questions from people out there? Because I don't want to monopolize it myself. I just want to, there's a few more things which you brought up. Let's bring this one up. I'll put it big screen so people can see it. The efficacy of different energy levels used in focused and radial extracorporeal shockwave therapy in the treatment of plantar fasciitis.
Yeah, that's the reference to the paper we talked about with the 356 randomized controlled trials.
Yeah.
I think I put in your host chat, I think I put the link to that if you can share that if you want to. If somebody was asking about it on the chat, I think. Okay,
we'll do that. Actually, I've got it there. I can't copy and paste it. We'll make sure that goes in there. Okay, brilliant. And journey of cellular physiology, comparison of efficacy of 8 treatments for plantar fasciitis, and that was the network meta-analysis.
Yeah.
Fine.
The
so we
about is this? Yeah, this one exactly. The one you just had up there.
There we go.
So GTPS is obviously a very tricky condition to treat, and you know this study came out last summer, and previously we've had there is evidence for radial. This is a focused shockwave treatment. Radial usually works within 5 or 6 treatments and has a success rate of around about 80%. This study came out last summer, and it was 3 sessions done weekly, combined with good quality rehab, and it was a significant reduction in pain with an 86.6% success rate that was maintained for over 6 months. And you know that's great. That's an amazing study, and published in one of the top journals in the world, the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery. The other thing, you know, that we talk loosely about this on the course as well. The gold standard for rehabilitation for GTPS is the LEAP trial. So the LEAP trial had 14 supervised physio sessions over 8 weeks, and so when you then compare, you know, something like the cost of that to a patient, if you were to follow the LEAP trial, and it's both impractical. I mean, most of my patients can't come for 3 times a week, 1 week, or let alone 4 weeks. And you know, this fits much better into a private practice scenario where you can literally get people in 3 times over 3 weeks, and you can then get a success rate of nearly 90%, which is tremendous in comparison. So I do, you know, we talked about this, you know, not everybody needs to have a shockwave device to be successful. I think it adds something extra to your practice. And certainly for those patients who are tricky to get better, those 20-30% that struggle to find the improvement, shockwave can be the thing that makes a difference. And there is evidence out there to show that. But you know, you don't have to invest thousands into this. Like Mike was saying earlier, it's got to do with your client group, who you normally see, who are going to come into you and ask for this treatment. And that should guide you really whether it's a worthwhile investment. Because you know, over 3 years, 5 years, that £8,000 or £10,000 gets broken down into much smaller chunks. Excuse me. Gets broken down into smaller chunks, and then it's much more manageable.
It's see, I look at that and because I see a lot of clients with pain around there and gastroenteric pain syndrome, and straight away I'm thinking, I don't know what rehab exercises they had along with this, but that seems really important, because something like this, we know that if you're doing anything which can potentially compress and irritate the tendon, that can slow down recovery. So with runners particularly, we're looking for maybe a tilt of the pelvis or something, and so we're looking at that on gait analysis and maybe speeding up cadence or something to try and reduce that tilt or whatever it is. And the same as if they're doing exercises where they are kind of shoving that hip out, or typical things which a lot of other physios or sports therapists will give them, like leg abductions and dropping the leg, or sleeping at night, or crossing their legs. So I think it's all very well having this, but if you're not giving the right rehab along the side, you could just be making it feel great and then giving them an exercise where they are irritating that tendon, for example, whatever it is, and then going around in circles. So it's really important what they're doing alongside it, which is what you said last week, wasn't it? It's not a magic thing by itself.
It has some success rate with it in isolation, but it's much better when you add it with the appropriate rehab. You know, for GPS, for instance, as you just explained there, there are so many factors to think about. You know, activity modification is one of them. Making sure that you're not overly compressing that tendon during, you know, sleep and all those things is huge things. And then in the athletic population, looking at other factors that's leading to them having the problems as well. So yes, so much more to it than just sticking a machine on somebody.
But yeah, but managing to help calm it down before you build it up, sort of thing, is the big thing which holds a lot of people back. So this is maybe where this jumps in. Very interesting. Mike,
it's what we find in clinical practice, exactly that point there, where you know you do manage to reduce that pain and you improve function pretty quickly.
Yeah,
loading seems to become smoother. The session on session loading is easier to go through with less pain. People adhere better to their exercises, and you then get a good outcome.
Oh, definitely. With plantar fasciopathy, we all talk about loading and that, but then when you've actually got it yourself and you're trying to do heavy loading, and you think you haven't done that much, you wake up the next morning, you can't get out of bed again, and you're like, what is this all about? It's not, definitely strength training is not the answer to all of these conditions as well. Yeah, very interesting.
Client this afternoon. She's had plantar fasciitis since June last year. Completely ignored it. She was walking around in wellies for 3 months. And ended up getting it, and then continued walking the dog for 2 hours a day. Kept on doing that until around about December time, where the pain started getting worse, and to the point where she couldn't walk every day anymore. She cut it down to just once every other day, but didn't actually stop altogether. She then went to see an advanced physio practitioner in the NHS, actually, who then told her to change her activities a little bit. And to seek out Shockwave. And she came in and she said, normally I would walk in with crutches because I can't actually put my foot to the ground. And she proper hobbled into the room. She had evidence of a CT scan which showed bone edema and plantar fasciitis. And so we decided to go ahead and treat it. And, you know, she walked out of here with being able to put a foot on the ground and walk in a normal gait pattern after the first session. Now, that not all of that will maintain, as I explained to her. Sometimes you get this hyperstimulation analgesia, which is great because one, you know you're hitting the right spot where you know you're going to get some effect, and then gradually that process then gets better and better with repeated treatments. But you know the fact that she got the relief from it, something can be done with it. She was worried about needing to go for surgery. She didn't want to have steroid injections. And so, you know, she then had looked around and found us for some shockwave therapy. So, you know, the smile on her face when she walked out was immense, and the relief on her face as well from being able to put a foot on the ground for the first time in a couple of months.
There you go. Put a price on that, people. Priceless. See? Worried about the investment. No, it's great, but I just want to make sure that no one out there measures the success of their treatment by how the patient feels at the end of that session, because you can hit them with a wet kipper and sing Kumbaya, my lord, and they might feel better afterwards. But yeah, it's good to see that it does. I mean, I was recommended Shockwave after I had some ultrasound, a scan and that, and they saw an edema and they saw a build up and they saw the bit of degeneration. And the first thing he suggested went to see a specialist with Shockwave, and I was like, how much? And eventually I got over it, but it took me like a good 7 months of running and thinking, oh, I'm broken and worrying I'm getting old and all this sort of stuff. So you probably can get through it, but if you want to get it done, recover quicker, and get back to your chosen activity, then this is maybe where it gets in. Yeah, Mike, come on, you haven't said anything for a while. You got the hat, you got the background. Hit us.
So
I love that background.
Yeah, well, I wanted to have a chat a little bit about what Gary mentioned last week about the education, because I think did you have some questions about that, or some comments about that in the week as well? Some people saying, why do we need to get trained in it? Because
yeah, there was that. I mean, that was one of the people again thinking of ultrasound, aren't they? Ultrasound, even at level, I can't remember which one it is. I think level 4 ultrasound and heat modalities introduced, and you're sent away to do these massive mathematical equations of how much it should be and how deep it should be, and multiply this, and then everyone goes to clinic and they just switch it on and the patients are happy and they kind of forget about all of these equations. So some people kind of think this is going to be the same thing. You do training how to use it, but ultimately you just stick on some gel, finding something that doesn't make it too painful for them and rubbing it around. So yeah, some people dismiss it. Basically, I'll paraphrase what they said, but so yeah. The training with regards to using the equipment, Uwe's kind of said that you need to be specific, but
yeah. So I think it all depends on your original training, whatever you had when you very first qualified. So if you covered a similar kind of syllabus, then you will and you're able to appraise the literature, then you can read these papers, and then you can use the knowledge you've already got from your original qualification that you've been assessed doing, and then you can apply that knowledge to a new modality. The problems occur, I think, where you've never done anything like this before, and again, like you said, you go along to a therapy expo and then you've been convinced to buy a machine.
A therapy exposition, not to single out any particular expo, but yeah, I said a big therapy exposition. Yeah.
Other expos are available.
Yeah, expositions.
So but and that's the thing, and you don't really question it because you think, well, it must be okay for me because they're willing to sell it to me. But the manufacturers have no idea about your qualification. They have no idea what you covered, so I think it's really important that if you don't know much about tendinopathy, then you need to research tendinopathy, because that's where the evidence lies within this modality. So you need to know what that is. You need to know about how to the differences in the different devices, the main difference between focus and the pressures that are available in those machines compared to the radial machines, and you need to have a go. You need to have a go, and if you've never done anything like it before, you need to know about positioning of the patient, the using of the controls and setting everything up. And I think it's really important. I think if you've done a degree or you've had that kind of electrotherapy training at level 4, level 5, you could probably get away with a 1-day course. But if you've not really had any of that training, then you're going to need something more in depth, because the issue is on the CPD training, you don't get assessed. And to show competency, you have to have an assessment. So, and if you haven't had that, then that's something you really need to think about before you invest in any modality, let alone Shockwave.
It sounds like, I'm not just picking you up here, but it sounds like if you're going to go on a good course like you guys do, you're going to learn a lot more than just about how to switch a machine on and off. There's a lot more around it where, like you said, you're going to brush up your information with regards to the information out there on tendinopathies and a lot more rather than just switching a machine on. So just answering a question here, Penny has said, Penny Marie Newcomb, what do you charge for Shockwave session, please? I looked it up on Google. It depends, doesn't it? There's packages, but more or less, what do you think? Depends on the area, I guess, you live in. But
I think it depends on the area. You look at London prices and the rest. I think around about London parts, I think you'd be lucky if you can get a standalone Shockwave session without anything else for £100. I think the average price down there is about 150. That's not something we could get away with up here in Yorkshire. Personally, we charge £65, and that includes the rehab side of things as well. It's not just for the Shockwave. And to put that into context, we charge nearly £40 for our physio session. And so it's an extra £25 on top of that.
Yeah. And what's the kind of, it's difficult, it depends on obviously the individual, but to give the patient an idea of how many sessions they're going to need, is there an idea you can give them, or is it very much, it depends on?
The ISMST has recommendations for most conditions, and it's somewhere between 3 and 6 treatments.
Okay.
So quite often you would go, and for an Achilles, mid-portion Achilles, you might just do 3 times weekly appointments, and then you would then continue with the rehab. And if you feel like you need to, if it was really stubborn, you might need to stimulate it again. You might go a couple of weeks after that, do another session, and then follow-up session a couple of weeks after that again. And that's pretty typical for most conditions. The kind of the thought is because you're trying to set up these biological mechanotransduction processes, you need the minimum of the 3 weekly sessions to actually get those started. But there are some interesting studies, like there's one in tennis elbow, which looked at efficiency against surgery, so tenotomies, and there was a 77% success rate, I believe, in surgery, and there was a 56% success rate in shockwave. Now, the interesting bit there was that it was a single course, a single treatment of shockwave that was compared to. So there are some studies out there who have done that as well. I had a quick look today as well. There was another study on, I think, plantar fasciitis. I didn't have time to read it, but it was literally a single treatment of shockwave. So there is probably some effect on pain with that, I would think. But in terms of trying to reason out what you're doing and how you need to do it to get the effects that you're after, you probably need those minimum of 3 sessions, and that's certainly what we recommend on our treatment courses.
I wonder whether you actually get, because we all know that compliance is tricky. It's one of the things that delays recovery more than anything else. But I guess if you are using something which does make them able to walk out after the first session, you're going to get more of a buy-in. So as long as you explain this isn't fixing you, this means you now need to make sure you take this out.
Yeah.
People hate it. I mean, you call it a window of opportunity and everyone jumps on you saying that's a horrible expression. But if you can make that person happy, which I loved at one of the One Chat Lives, I remember the conferences, Paul Coker, who I looked up, I think Cornwall, he uses it down there. I can't remember which machine he's got, but he loves it. Paul Coker, he's been on the show, and he was doing a talk about kind of passive modalities and are they really passive? And he says for some reason, as soon as a patient likes something, we all kind of criticize it and say, well, that we mustn't be using that then. He says we've seemed to have forgotten as a profession that it's something, if a patient feels better after we give them, it doesn't matter what we give them to a certain extent, then we need to use that and work on it. So I think that's an important one. I imagine you get the buy-in, to listen to you and trust you with everything else you say.
No, definitely. Just on the price there, I've kind of changed my strategy a little bit. So I used to have like a shockwave package where I said, right, okay, if you want shockwave, then it's this. And we would have very similar pricing to you, Eva. So we'd be sort of around the 45 quid mark. But now I've moved all my prices up for every patient. So now I'm not met with that dilemma where I go, this person could probably do with shockwave, but if I give it to you, it's going to be this much extra. I don't like that kind of confrontation. So now I go, right, okay, all my prices are 75. And if you need it, you get it. And if you don't, you don't. So that kind of everybody pays for everything. So in terms of making your money back, that's a really nice way to do it. You've got that option there of that particular treatment, and they don't feel pressures into buying it, and that you just don't get that awkward conversation.
Good idea. Yeah, another great idea.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of clinics do that. I feel bad for the people who don't need the shockwave. They're used to paying our normal prices.
That's taxes. It's just a tax system. It's how the country operates.
Yeah, so we talk them through it and we explain the costs of it, and we get consent for all of that before we even start the treatment. So they're fully aware of what the full course of treatment could look like if they were to need, say, 6 as opposed to just a 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful, gentlemen. Well, look, I'm hoping it's all gone a bit quiet in the room. Still, everyone's there, but they're just kind of listening, I guess. I think we've tackled a lot of the questions which you had sent in since last week. You guys have now got an idea about how much the equipment is going to cost, an idea of what to watch out for. You've got an idea of different payment plans and PayPal, which we'll definitely make sure we put some links and information on that, how much you can charge, etc. As far as the training goes, obviously you guys offer that yourselves. If people want information on what they've heard from you tonight, let me just bring up for people in the room your websites. Is it all on your website so people are interested, or should they contact you some other way?
Yeah, mine's on the mte.education website. Yeah.
Let's just bring that up so people can see. Is it on that one?
Yep, that's the one. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so there we go. If you listen to the podcast, you got movement. If you put movement therapy clinics into Google, then that will come up, and you'll find information on that. Fantastic. And Uwe, for you, is it a case of going to
yes, contact me off my website. There's no information there about Shockwave courses. All the courses that I run, currently at least, is run through Venn Healthcare, and where they now have a CPD structure which has been expanded this year, where we talk about radial starter conditions and radial advanced conditions, and then we also have a focused option as well. So, but obviously, from what I understand from you guys and Mike, is that you have a regulatory issue there for sports therapists, where you need to make sure that you're actually adequately trained and have a certification for that, which is obviously different for physios and osteopaths and things, where Shockwave does form part of our scope of practice and we can use it as long as we are trained in that approach.
Fantastic. So links to both of these gentlemen's websites are on last week's notes on Podbean. If you go to that one, that's where I'll put all the links and everything down there. We can put them in ST as well. And trying to think if there's anything else we haven't covered yet. We've looked at the safety aspects, which people are worried about. We've looked at the evidence. I think we've done pretty well on there. We've even delved into how, Mike's course, which I imagine details on the website as well, about if you want to understand a little bit more about how to wade through the evidence and not just rely on what you see on Twitter and social media, because it's not great. And it's even worse than just reading the abstract, looking at something on Twitter. It's like, it gives you the chance to look at the paper, but it doesn't just stop there. So, no, Becky, not episode 3. These gentlemen have a living, Episode 3? ? No, not yet. The next episode will be, I will give an episode to anybody who actually invests in this Shockwave treatment and maybe use it for a month in clinic or something. Do your own kind of research. There's not enough research done by actual people in clinics. It'd be amazing if we did. Such a massive population of people who could be offering stuff. But yeah, I'd love to hear from some people who do invest in it, and we could even follow your progress, and yeah, it'd be interesting. So Becky, there you go. I don't know how convinced you are now, but if you are, then you're up. 2 months time, we'll book you just after Sarah's presentation on that bit of equipment she mentioned. We're looking forward to that before as well. Right, gang, thank you very much. Anything you need to add, Mike or Uwe?
No, all good. Yeah, I think over 2 sessions, I think we've covered everything.
Well, I'm hoping this is a pretty good, this isn't just for STA members. Obviously, you don't have to be a member of the STA to listen to this anyway. So yeah, people do use this. I hope this gets used to answer in other groups. I know I normally paste this in like the physiotherapist support group, Gemma's group, and a few other places. Anything that calls themselves kind of science-based sports therapy or science-based massage, I'll be there just chucking this stuff in. But you guys as well, like there's up to about 40 of you. If you each tell 2 or 3 people, then that's kind of 120. So use these 2 episodes to inform anybody who's interested or condemns it without thinking about it. So Andy Davis says is getting in here doing the haggling already. There you go. Andy says discounts for STA members for Shockwave course, Mike? ? To be continued. For that, you need to ask the Gary. Right, gang, thank you very much for coming along. Mike and Uwe, thanks so much for being the first and probably the last for a while of just a double date in terms of information. Really kind of you. Thank you very much. It's a huge topic.
You're welcome.
You've really cleared up a lot of kind of preconceived ideas I had. I hope it's been the same for people listening, and thank you people who join us live. We'll be back next Tuesday with another topic, another expert from the field. So do join us then. But for now, after 2 hours of fantastic information on shockwave therapy, thanks to Mike Grice and Uwe Indergaard, we'll say goodnight and thank you very much.
Cheers.
See you later.
Thanks, guys.